Welcome to another episode of The Third Option. This is the Godcast podcast of Rick and Judy Manis, and I'm Rick.
And I'm Judy, and this is The Third Option.
And this begins a series for November that it's going to have, I believe it's going to have a stream of Thanksgiving through it. A thread, like a thread.
You sewed it.
So every episode will have this thread of gratitude and Thanksgiving because this is the month of Thanksgiving. So what we've decided to do is we're going to take for this month, we're going to take four episodes doing character studies of people in the Bible and how their encounter with Jesus brought a change and actually produced a great gratitude in the people. And the first one that we're going to talk about is
your favorite.
Is apparently it's my favorite, or it seems to be, because I mention him so often, like every time I speak, it seems.
Yeah.
And I think you pronounce his name Zacchaeus. Or
Zacchaeus.
Or Zacchaeus.
No, I think it's Zacchaeus.
Or Zucchini. No.
That's what you said today.
Zacchaeus. And we know when we see his story, we know that a change happened because of his encounter with Jesus, and it made the man generous.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes along with gratitude, because anytime somebody does something really good for you, you want to do something generous.
Yeah.
You want to give them something. You say, "Can I give you something? I want to do something for you," because
or even just you want to be like them. Like, oh, he was so kind to me. Like, I just want to be kind. You know, I just want to be gracious because it's inspiring, I think.
So the man Zacchaeus. First of all, let's talk a little bit about tax collectors, and even before we go into that, maybe let's look at Matthew for just a minute, because Matthew was a tax collector.
So this story is found in Luke. Is it also found in Matthew?
I believe it's just Luke 19.
Just Luke. Okay. So we want to talk about Matthew, one of Jesus's disciples.
Yeah, because when you think of these 12 disciples, and these are human beings, we kind of like to think that they were sort of angelic, and they were just they all just loved each other and had no issues with each other, but they were humans.
Yeah.
In fact, if you read the Bible, you see there were issues quite a few times. There was jealousy that for sure that was going on. There were times that they would pick at each other and rib each other, make fun of each other. They would mock each other. James and John were mocked by the others because they were jockeying for position with Jesus, and they kind of got turned down, and so the other people mocked them and laughed at them and all that. They were human, is what I'm trying to say. And out of the 12, there very, very, very probably was one that was hated the most out of that group by the rest of the group, and that would have been Matthew.
Because he was a tax collector.
Because he was a tax collector, and that's how bad it was. They were the lowest of the low. They were considered even lower than a Roman soldier themselves.
But they were typically wealthy. They were typically people who, in the world's eye, would be successful. But in the Jewish culture, they were hated.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that they had going for them, was that it was a lucrative business, the way that they did it. But they had no friends. They were outcasts. They were pariahs among their own land, because they worked for an oppressive government, and they worked collecting taxes from people, and these taxes went to fund
the oppressive
government, and so they didn't believe. And then you had zealots who were like the dagger men, and they were, a lot of their work was assassins, and tax collectors often could have been targets for assassination, because they were working to overthrow Rome, and they did it by stealth and by violence. They were violent extremists.
Were they like ninjas?
Yeah, I guess kind of how I picture them. Yeah. And now there again, with the 12 disciples, we know at least one, Simon the Zealot, was chosen from among the group called the Zealots, and he was one of those people. So you got Simon and you got Matthew in the same group of 12. excuse me, you got Simon and Matthew in that same group of 12. And can you imagine them just looking at each other? Simon's like, is this man going to kill me? I gotta keep my head on a swivel here because I'm not sure I'm safe with this man because I know how they think of us and what they want to do to us often. And then Simon's looking at Matthew and thinking, I mean, just despising the kind of
Yeah.
person he is. And so that's how it is with tax collectors in the days of Jesus. And we know that he had a lot of interaction with tax collectors on purpose. And one in particular was that man named Zacchaeus.
Mm-hmm. And we would say that Zacchaeus would be considered a morally corrupt human
He admitted to being a thief.
In the eyes of the Jewish culture.
And the way that they did it was any of us would probably consider him morally corrupt because he was a thief. He did say that he had been stealing money.
It's so interesting that Jesus was willing to have this variety of people following him. Like his group they were really unique. There was a lot of diversity in that.
It says
12.
Something about Jesus, who's the same yesterday, today, and forever, because he still does the same thing, right?
Yeah, and he's unifying. He somehow brings them together. Somehow.
And we actually can see growth happen as they follow him, because that's all he said was follow me. He didn't say clean your life up first, and then you can be good enough to follow me. He just said follow me, and so they did. And then he would teach them as they were following, just like he does with us. Mm-hmm. That's he took us. He takes us just like we are, and then as we follow him, what he teaches us, what his voice, his word, his spirit teaches us, it brings changes,
and things start falling off. Right, as we walk, these, I guess you would say, flaws or issues that we have, they just sort of like fall, and we keep walking forward.
Those things that were hurting us, making us ugly, and all that, they fall off. But there's other things that rise up within us, good things, the goodness, the fruit of the Spirit, and that's what we see in the life of Zacchaeus. I don't know if I want to say Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus.
Zach.
I grew up with Zacchaeus. But I don't know if that
was a wee little man.
And a wee little man was he.
Yeah, there's a song.
So we do know that he was short, and that might have some bearing on his personality.
It's possible he was a dwarf.
Yeah.
If not, we know he was short, either one way or the other.
Right. We know that, well, we don't know, but you can assume that somebody who would take that position really is not comfortable, but like probably has some sort of familiarity with not being really the center of likability.
Maybe his appearance made him a mockery. Maybe, and how I could imagine it so easily of him being mocked and laughed at, in the streets of Jericho or wherever it was. We know he was a tax collector in Jericho. And a little bit of the backstory there is he wanted to work there in Jericho because Jericho had a lucrative balsam business.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And there was a lot of money flowing there. And so you have to bid to the government, make bids. You pay
to be a tax collector,
to get that district, to get that region. So he was the man. And it was a good, apparently he thought it was a good investment for him. So he was the guy. He was that tax collector in that region. So everybody knows who he is. He's probably got to have some thugs around him too for protection, because there are people that hate him enough to kill him.
Right.
And so he's living that life like this. So he's living in these walls. Doesn't have friends. His closest associates are thugs who probably also hate him too, but they like the money. And so he's living that life, and so then you can see how inside of him there would definitely be an emptiness, and he's aware of that God-shaped hole, if you will. But he's not allowed to go to synagogue because he's an outcast from that. So he can't get anything from the religion, but he hears of Jesus.
Okay.
And he climbs up the tree.
Okay, wait. Let's start in Luke 19 in the verse 1, and I'll read and you
All right, let's read the story.
Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, not just any old tax collector, and he was rich. And he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was short of stature.
Yeah, so he climbs up the tree because he wants to see. Apparently, he knows about Jesus. He's heard of him, and he's probably heard that he's very different, and so he wants to see.
Yeah. I guess the word going around was that he was hanging out with prostitutes, and one of his own followers was a tax collector,
and
or at least
Matthew,
had been.
he's even got one of his merry men is a tax collector. So he's allowing these kind of people,
So
and he's doing all these wonderful things.
It's piqued his interest.
Yeah.
And even making the water into wine, that story must have gotten out. And that sounds like a fun kind of guy, right?
So he's heard about the power, and he's probably heard about his goodness, his mercy, his compassion, because he's showing it everywhere he goes, and he wants to see.
Yeah,
he wants to see this Jesus, because there's never been anything like him. And Jesus calls out to him.
Okay, so this is Zacchaeus, ran ahead. He climbed up into a sycamore tree to see Jesus, for Jesus was going to pass that way. So is there anything about a sycamore tree that's important? Or?
Well, it's, we've got sycamore trees that we're familiar with here in America. It's actually a type of fig tree.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over there. The fig trees figure into the stories quite a bit
in that area.
But it's a sycamine fig was what it was, which has similar leaves, maybe like the sycamores that we're aware of.
Okay. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and he saw him, and he said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house.
It's interesting that he called him by name.
Yeah, how do you know his
That's
name?
I usually don't make a big deal out of that, because it doesn't seem like it has much to do with the rest of the story, but he called him by name.
Yeah.
And and so you have the Old Testament scriptures that says, I am the Lord, I have called you by name.
Right.
And so we see him doing that. And so that's a way of saying that I am him.
I know you.
And God knows who you are, and he's speaking to you now. So he says, I want to be at your house today.
That's so good, because could you imagine if you're so curious about who is this spiritual guy that I've heard all about, and you're climbing up just to get a glimpse of him, and he looks up and catches your eye and calls you by your name. Mm-hmm. That would kind of catch your attention.
I am the Lord. I know you by name. And so here's a place where he's not allowed to worship in synagogue. Mm-hmm. He's not allowed to be part of that community because of his lifestyle. And in spite of how he lives, in spite of the things he does, and he is a corrupt character, he is a thief, he does steal. Mm-hmm. God still says, I want to be with you.
So good.
I want to be with you. And he answered it because he heard that call. Mm-hmm. And what he heard that day, he did not hear what many were offering in the synagogues. He did not hear somebody saying you have to do this and this and this first. He didn't hear all the reasons that he was disqualified, which he would have heard anywhere else that was offering religion to him. Mm-hmm. But he heard the Lord say, I want to be with you today.
Yeah.
And so he responded to that because people respond to that. We love him because he first loved us. And we see an instant response because it was the correct call to Zacchaeus, where the other things being offered were not a correct call.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you point that out, because mostly religion is telling you what's wrong with you. We hate you because you're morally corrupt. We don't want anything to do with you. You've made bad choices. We don't like you like you are. We want you to fix yourself before you're allowed into our...
You're not qualified.
And Jesus does the opposite of that. And he says, I want to be
He
with
qualifies first. The qualification was, I want to be with you.
you.
So we can do this.
Yeah. And so Zacchaeus can receive.
Yeah.
He says, okay. So he made haste and he came down and received him joyfully.
Okay. So the joy rises in this man's heart.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Here he is, and I don't know what he was feeling the moments before that necessarily. Maybe it was I don't a good anxiousness about an excitement, maybe about I want to see this guy. But whatever was going on normally in his day to day life, now he's got this joy going on because the Lord says, "I want to be with you."
Yeah.
And see, and that's the response we get because that's the cry, that the connection that everybody's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so often, um, legalistic religion doesn't meet that,
Yeah.
and people can try it, and a lot of times people think they don't even believe in God anymore because what they've heard of or tasted was legalistic religion, and they're like, yeah, that was not it for me. That did not do
I
it.
have no
That was
attraction
not
to
a
that.
road.
No,
Yeah,
no interest
it
in
did
that.
nothing. There was no joy for me. There was nothing. This one brought joy.
Yeah.
This call to Zacchaeus brought joy. This call that did not have to qualify him first, did not make him qualify himself. The qualification came from Jesus, and that says, I want to be with you. I want to dine with you at your house.
What Zacchaeus would have been used to with the rabbis, like a regular rabbi, would be rejection. Mm-hmm. But with Jesus, it was
the opposite.
I want to come hang out with you.
Yeah.
Okay. But when they saw it, we're talking about the crowd, they all complained, saying, he has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner.
So picture this crowd here, and Jesus looks up and singles him out of all the people. Zacchaeus jumps down out of the tree, and there they go, off to his house, and people are looking at him like,
why would he do that?
What's going on?
Yeah, that's wrong. I mean, think of the most morally corrupt person you can imagine in today's society. And then imagine Jesus picking that particular person.
Good point. So let's do this right now, just for a minute. Everybody watching and listening, think of one person in the world that you dislike the most, whether it's a person that you know personally. Maybe they've hurt you in some bad way. Or maybe it's a public figure that you just hate what they stand for, hate what they say, hate what they do.
And imagine Jesus.
Picking. Let's do it this way, because most people relate to politics in some way. Pick the political figure that you despise the most in America.
Yeah, like your kind of your stomach turns whenever they're talking, and
think of that person, and then think of all of us Christians being in a crowd because Jesus is going to come and he's going to be with us today. And he looks out over and he sees that one person that we hate the most, that we despise the most, that we would really just like for that person to go away because they're problems, they are trouble. And Jesus says,
I want to hang out with you.
I want to be with you. And he leaves the rest and goes off
good people
to spend time with this one person. And here we are, all of us good people that have been doing our best to prepare ourselves for this meeting. And he chooses this most corrupt person we can imagine.
It's kind of painful to think about it.
But that's the Jesus that turns things upside down, because you know what he's doing when he does this? See, there's so many prophecies that say things like this, that he will make the mountains low and the valleys high. He will debase the high and lofty, and he will exalt the low and humble. And so that's what he's doing all the time. In fact, all these character studies that we're going to do this month are exaltations of lowly people. Mm-hmm. And in almost all of our, just our good moral minds, because of their actions, I mean, they are doing lowly actions.
Right.
But their lowly actions did not cause Jesus to treat them like lowly people, because they weren't. Remember, Jesus still sees the pearl. Jesus knows the pearl, and he knew this pearl, and that's why he called him by name. I know you.
Mm-hmm.
I know you. He didn't say, hey, you crooked thief, come down here.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you traitor.
Mm-hmm.
That's what everybody else would call him.
Right.
But he says, I know you.
Mm-hmm.
And something happened
Yeah.
in the house.
It's not recorded what's the conversation was, but then we saw Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor.
Okay, now something has happened.
Something's happened.
So we see a man who was so selfish that he would steal from these people that are being oppressed by Roman government.
He was a taker.
He was a taker. And something happens in this encounter with the Lord, who says, I know you and I want to be with you. And really, if we really know how it works, probably about all of us could relate to that. I know ICAT could, because when I look back at my life, there was a time when my life was changed like Zacchaeus. My actions began to change because of an encounter with Jesus. And I look back at that and I realize that he didn't start liking me after I started changing for the better. He already liked me, just like he did Zacchaeus.
Mm-hmm.
He does not love me now. Now, I'm not doing a lot of the evil things that I was doing before. Not that I'm perfect by any means, but there are a lot of things I used to do that are horrible things, that were selfish things, that were harmful to other people, and I don't do those particular things now.
And they were harmful to yourself.
And they were harmful to me, of course. And I don't do those things. But Jesus didn't start liking me because I started acting better. He liked me before.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's why he called me. That's why he opened his arms to me and said, "Come."
Yeah.
And the and then the meeting with him, the encounter, the interaction with Jesus, this walk with him that we have, it starts to do a change, and we see a change happen in the man's heart. And the Lord called him by name. He didn't call him traitor. He didn't call him corrupt thief. He called him Zacchaeus. He called him by the one. He called him as the one that he knew, and treated him like the one that he knew. And when he treated him like the one he knew, to use a term that you use a lot, he found his authentic self, and he found his worth because the Lord showed him worth, showed what he was worth. And when he realized who he was, in a sense, and what he was worth, he starts acting like it. And that's what happens to us in our salvation experience, in our redemption.
Yeah, because even that word salvation in the Greek, soteria, it means healing, wholeness, becoming whole. And so all these things that Zacchaeus and even us, we put on top of us to either protect us or they're results of, just how we've been treated over time. All those things just start to kind of come off, and that true sense of who we are starts to manifest or just becomes clear,
Right. And I look back at my own life, the thing, I did not set out as a young person to say, I'm going to go do evil things.
You were just trying to survive.
I was just trying to take care of me the best way I knew how, which wasn't very good. No. But
me either.
It was all I came up with, just like Zacchaeus, who's stealing from people that are being oppressed. That was his best at that time. And when he comes to himself, so to speak, when he comes to his authentic self, he's like, you know what? I never set out to just be an evil person stealing from people. I came into that, with my walk. And I believe, excuse me, I believe that the light of God is within all of us, and we really want to do good. That light can be covered. Jesus said, if it's covered, how great is that darkness? But when it's revealed, and Zacchaeus gets revealed, the Bible says in Colossians 3 that when the Lord is revealed, then we also are revealed with him.
Who we really are.
And the Lord showed his goodness to Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus responded out of the goodness of his heart.
And he wanted to be generous. It just was like generosity sprouted.
And his heart is so open and free and so grateful that he becomes generous. And this community that he's disconnected from because he's an outcast because of his actions, he now starts to make a connection. He says, I want to connect. I'm going to be a part. I'm going to be a blessing in this. He could have just said, I'm not going to steal anymore and just sat to himself.
Yeah.
But he says, no, I'm going to connect. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to do good. I'm going to
give half of everything I have
to the poor.
To the poor. Mm-hmm. And he says, if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore it fourfold.
Not just pay him back, not just pay him back double, not pay him triple.
4 times.
I'm going to pay him back 4 times. See, another thing he's saying is, I really don't need the money anymore. I thought I did. That was the one thing I had going for me. Now I don't need it. I've got so much more going for me.
Right.
And that's the wholeness of salvation.
He found his significance.
And that's why Jesus makes that declaration. It's so big.
Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because he also is a son of Abraham.
And notice he didn't say, now Zacchaeus gets to go to the good place instead of the bad place when he dies. He said salvation, or as you just said, the word is wholeness. Zacchaeus has become a whole man again. Yes. He's come to his authentic self and come to who he really, now he can be like he told another person, go and sin no more. Mm-hmm. Don't miss the mark anymore. Now that you know what God feels about
who you really are, you can just act like who you really are.
And we know who we really are when we find out how God feels about us.
Yeah.
God loves us.
And I think it's so interesting. He uses the word salvation has come to this house before he ever went to the cross, before he ever brought the Holy Spirit. Before any of that, he's acknowledging salvation in this man's house because of this wholeness that he experienced.
Yeah, and we see that happen time and again. Excuse me, time and again in his encounters with people. We see a heart change, and isn't that what it's all about?
Yeah.
The salvation I enjoy is a heart play. It's a heart change. It's so much more than just knowing I'm holding a ticket to the good heaven when I die. Eternity with God will always be there. Yeah. And we're in a presence of God even right now too. But the thing that I enjoy the most is not just like what kind of house will I have in heaven or something like that. I like the joy that's in my heart. I like the peace that's in my heart. I like the fullness of God that I feel in an ever increasing way. And that's soteria. That's wholeness. That's salvation that happens to us. And he came to make us whole.
And he said about the son of Abraham, he too is a son of Abraham, because the Pharisees a lot of times were saying, they were relying on the fact that they were sons of Abraham, that was what qualified them. But anyway, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost.
Yeah, and they were, when he said that they were qualified, he was qualified being a son of Abraham. He was essentially saying he's worthy of this too. Even though he's done all those things, he's worthy of those things.
Even the most morally corrupt is loved by God.
Yeah.
And all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him to hear him.
And so it did exactly what he wanted. More tax collectors came and said, you mean we can have this too? And Jesus says that to this very day, whosoever will. Thanks for giving us your time.
Yeah, this was a good character study on Zacchaeus and how he came to gratitude, how he came to thankfulness by being changed.
The heart change makes you gracious, makes you grateful. Sometimes I feel like I'm the most grateful person there is. I hope everybody else feels like that.
Yeah, it's an encounter with Jesus. It's a walk. It's an enjoyment of this love, by God.
He came to make us whole.
Thank you for giving us your time. We hope to see you next time with our next episode.
Have a great day.